What's up, guys? Welcome back to The Riff. Today we are in beautiful Los Angeles, catching up with my buddy JESSE DAVEY, and we're going to discuss all about the elusive SRV tone. Check it out. Just a heads up, guys, this is a different style video. It's more like a podcast, so there isn't any kind of video features. It's just me and JESSE talking, but there are pictures that are pinned into the audio of detailed setup pictures, string action pictures, and stuff that you kind of want to maybe check out because I feel it's important. There's also Dan Erlewine's SRV setup when he went and checked out Stevie's guitar a while back, and there is just a wealth of knowledge. So, it's definitely worth taking a peek at, even though it's just two guys talking. All right, guys, so we are here with JESSE DAVEY today. JESSE, how are you?
I'm really good. How about you?
Excellent. The weather in LA has been nice and cool, and it's given us the ability to tone hunt and dive deep into the tone of one Stevie Ray Vaughan. We've devoted about 4 solid days of chiseling away tone from 1983 to 1987, 88 with some wonderful results. With Stevie's tone, it always struck me as, you hear it all the time, the tone is in the hands, and I really, really feel that. But he could play through anything and sound like himself, and I think that's what separates a guitar player from a great guitar player. Is they can always find their their voice in whatever they're playing. Do you remember when you heard Stevie and what it was that grabbed you?
There's a whole story of how I heard Stevie when we went camping one time, and that was the first time I'd ever heard Stevie play.
Yeah.
And it was literally when we got back from the camping trip. I played Stevie every single day, and I couldn't believe what I was hearing.
Right.
And it was when we got back that night on the radio, they announced that Stevie had died. So that was kind of my introduction, and that was it hit pretty hard actually. That was kind of crazy. But I do think that tone, in some ways, it's a lot in your fingers, and in some ways, I think it's about working with the tone you've got. So
right.
You can't always play. If you're used to working with different tones, you can't always play what you would normally play with that tone. You have to play what works with that tone.
Right.
And I think you can hear a lot of good players who get really good tones. You can hear them making any tone work for them, but they don't normally they don't just play their stuff. They play what's going to work with that limited tone.
Yeah. That's a great point, and that's totally understandable. It may not be where they want to go with it, but in that realm of what they're working with, they always try to get the most out of it.
Yeah.
And I think that's a lot of what Stevie did is, it was a simple setup, and we often talk about how he wasn't dependent on anything on the floor. He was depending on getting his overall tone from the amplifier, whether that be, modded or worked on, or having his guitar set up, to be accessible to help him get that sound. I think that a lot of it was in that around. I fell into the whole thing when I was young, as I needed to have a TS-808 or a TS-9, thinking that was going to be the answer, and it's really not. And surprisingly, if we were able to be at those gigs, I bet we would hear a lot of clean breakup from the amps themselves.
Yeah, I think there's a whole bunch of variables that if you can get them all right, you'll get a great tone.
Yeah.
And you can afford to have one or two of them not perfect, but I think I think there's a little, I'll get into trouble for this. I think the guitar itself, although very important, I think it's more important about the way it feels and how you feel about it than the tone. I think that, of course the guitar makes a difference to tone, of course it does, but I think there's other variables like how high you have the strings that probably make a bigger difference to the tone than if it's a 60s guitar or if it's a 90s guitar. I think if you have a good high action, then the string is free to vibrate and create the tone. Whereas if you have a very low action, it will choke the tone, and you won't. What I'm trying to say is that'll make more difference.
Yeah, if you want, we could get into that a little bit. I was, grab your guitar over there if you want. I was a person that always, I had heavier strings, higher action, and I thought, well, this is it. And there were a lot of things that instantly changed. That big that you would get was always there. It was always present, and it was super deep. Your tone was a little deeper. But even just coming here this weekend, messing around with a few things and stealing a few nods from you, I was able to to hear a few little nuances in my guitar and the playing that made, I had like an aha moment. So I mean, essentially, your action is pretty high, but mine is high, and I think I wore that as like a cape, I get 100 thousandths at my 12th fret, and I was the man, and then I had some problems with my hand, so I had to get that fixed out. So dropping the action, changing the string gauge helped, but as my hands got stronger now, we raised the action the other day, and more of the guitar came alive. And talk a little bit about that, like how you have your setup at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a balance for me anyway. It's getting the action as high as you can go without it sort of too much affecting what you'd play. There's a balance there. I think so it's a balance between playing and tone, and they both go together. And I think if you have your action too high, then it just becomes impossible to play what you'd like to play. Right. And if it's really low, sure, it's nice and easy to play, but does it sound good?
You're sacrificing something.
Yeah, so I think it's a balance between those two things. So I like to get it pretty high, and I normally just do it by ear.
Yeah.
But it's probably, I mean, just looking at it, it's almost quarter of an inch.
One thing I did miss was the big, like when you play the open E now, like it doesn't touch and it just rings. There's no rattling on the old frets, and that's one thing I did miss. And now that I said my hands I've kind of worked them in shape.
Yeah.
I got that back, coming here and hanging out with you, and I was like, oh man, that's it. That's how it's supposed to be. And my hands are, but I'm blessed to have my hands starting to feel better now, and I can set it up like that. And also some of the pickup adjustments where I was so stuck one way, and then we brought the bass side of my pickups down, and it actually made it bigger and more airy and a fatter sound, which is something that, I didn't think would happen.
Yeah.
So
well, I mean, the low strings on your guitar obviously have a lot more mass, a lot more metal in them, so they do tend to be louder. So if you rock the bass end of the pickup away from the string, then it'll balance that the tone between it a little bit better. And I mean, I find even not to have the treble end of the pickup too close either. I mean, it's just personal preference, but it can get a little harsh if it gets too close to the string. So it seems to mellow it slightly if it's a little way away from it.
Yeah. Currently, I'm using 56, 36, 26, 17, 13, and 10. And that's on the heavier side to most people. And some people feel like it needs to be a 12, but I think when you start doing that, I use a fuzz a lot. And I feel like, over a 10, it kind of starts getting the fuzz very muddy when you go into the lower, the higher strings.
Yeah. But
I think a 10 just balances very, very well. We talked to our buddy Philip Sace the other night, and it was the same thing. He's using kind of the same set, and that was good to hear, because he's got hellacious tone, and he's always after that Stevie thing as well. So what are you using for a gauge? It's kind of similar, right?
Yeah, I'm using, I think it's 11... I think it's a 52 right now, but I normally would like a 56 on the bottom. So it's 11 to various gauges in between, depending on how fit my fingers are, I think. Really.
Yeah. So I mean, really, like and I've stressed this in other videos I've done. It's more along the lines of getting the most you can from your guitar, cable into the amp. Worry about the other stuff afterwards. That's what I think, because if you have a great foundational tone and you're already stellar with no variables involved, then whatever you put on it should essentially make it sound better. If it makes it sound worse, then that's not, to me, that wouldn't be the pedal for me. You know what I mean? Or and then coming out of the guitar, if we were heading to the amp, you like myself, you like a big sound, blackface style sound.
I think one of the, to jump back a step, I think one of the things that's so overlooked is the pickups. Yeah, okay. And I think there's a huge, we were talking about it earlier, but there's a huge trend, I guess, when you think it started, like in some late 60s or something, a trend
to overwind them? To
begin to make pickups louder and... Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Seymour Duncan was doing them for Hendrix. You know what I mean? But, yeah, it's a total life changer. And a couple of my friends have purchased pre-CBS Strats, and I'm not saying it has to be pre-CBS Strat, but pre-CBS Strats are known to be wound a certain way. And I think that when you actually hear what that does to your sound, it's kind of like a light bulb moment, like, holy shit, this is the now you're starting to get somewhere, because it totally changes. And it's not, I'm not saying it's a pre-CBS pickup, but it's a way that they're wound. And everybody wants to wind a pickup as hot as you can get it, so you can just have all that sizzle, but that takes away so much organic feel and so much body to the tone.
So what we're both talking about is basically underwound pickups.
Yeah.
Just sound nicer to us.
Yeah.
Anyway, I mean, there's obviously with tone, there's no
I think
rules.
you get. I mean, we measured my bridge pickup today. It was, or yesterday it was a 4.9, 5K.
Yeah.
And my bridge pickup has no issues. You know what I mean? And you make the
Bluebird pickups.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
but that's based upon being you know, when I say underwound, it doesn't mean you just hardly wind them at all. There's a magic area where you want to stay in, and most pickups actually overwind. And the thing is, okay, you put a overwound set of pickups in your guitar, and it's going to be louder and harsher in a way, and you'll think, wow, that's amazing, compared to the old ones. But actually, for a good tone, I think less winds on a pickup to a certain extent produce a fuller, more natural tone. I think it's when you discover that and you go to a set of pickups that sort of in that lower end of the sort of magic area, that your guitar will come alive.
Yeah, and then if you backtrack one step further, now that you have the lower output pickups and you adjust them properly, you have that action where it's got some height to it. And I'm not saying so high that you can fit a 10 millimeter socket underneath it. I'm just saying high enough to where it's ringing and the guitar becomes really resonant and percussive at the same time. That allows you to get the amp cooking a little better, because now you can get that amp up to get that fullness, and you got those tubes in that range where they want to heat up, where they want to work, where they want to take what you're giving into the amp and give it back to you. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And having the high action means you've actually got such a wider playing dynamic. So if you hit with the high action, if you hit the string hard, it'll keep getting louder.
Yeah.
Whereas if your action's low, when you hit it hard, your tone is actually being fretted out by the fret above it.
Yeah.
So that's your limiting factor. So the higher the action is, the louder your string can be, the more dynamics you've got.
Right.
And I think you can really hear that with Stevie Vaughan. He'll often not kick in a pedal and just play loud, and it'll distort more, and you don't even need a pedal in some cases.
Yeah, his right hand was doing a lot of that. We spent some time. We spent a good amount of time going over bootlegs and just listening and saying, no, he's not turning that on there, Because let's just face it, he's my ultimate, and he meant a lot to you as well.
Absolutely,
I know there's certain times where you wear that hat. No, I don't mean to say wear a hat because it's very cliche, but there's certain times where you put that suit on and you say, I'm going to go after this again. And then there's certain times where you got to give your head a rest and walk away, but it's always there. And for somebody like me, he means so much to me, and I know he means a lot to you. It's fun when you can get a couple of guys together and really dive into it, and it's the little things like, realizing that he's not really using a tube screamer for a lot of the stuff. When he wanted to go crazy, you can hear it, but a lot of that was more in the pressure of the right hand, and picking harder and playing harder and digging in harder. So there you go, guys. There's the first part. This is actually going to be a 3-part series. Next part we'll discuss amplifiers, and after that we will discuss what was on the floor, tube screamers, pedals, and how that was working to Stevie's advantage. I'd also like to say Jesse is really a fountain of knowledge. And he was somebody that I've looked up to when I started playing guitar, and to become friends with him through all of this, and to be able to play guitar with him back and forth. And I stayed up at his house, and he was nothing but kind, and he's a really sweet guy. And like I said, any kind of tips that are coming out of his brain and he's sharing, I adhere to it, because he's, like I said, a wealth of knowledge. So I just basically want to extend my deepest gratitude to Jesse, and stay tuned for parts 2 and 3, because they are very in-depth and very informative on the Stevie Ray Vaughan tone. So we'll catch you guys soon. Leave a comment, like down below, any kind of suggestions you want. Thanks, guys. Parts 2 and 3 coming up. Peace.